Hello, I'm doing a movie review, and the movie I want to review is the 1973 horror anthology film, The Vault of Horror, which is a sequel to the 1972 horror film, Tales from the Crypt, which was based on the EC comic book series of the same name. Now, I have The Vault of Horror on the same DVD set as the original Tales from the Crypt movie. Now, The Vault of Horror takes its name from the EC comic book series, The Vault of Horror. However, none of the stories in this movie are actually based on stories from the Vault of Horror comics. All the stories in this movie are actually based on stories from the Tales from the Crypt comic books, except for one story in this movie that's actually based on a story from EC's comic book series, Ishaq Suspense Stories. So, really, this movie is based in name only on the Vault of Horror comics. Now, the plot of the Vault of Horror is essentially the same plot line as the first one. It's 5 stories in one, but there's a wraparound story that ties all the stories together. Essentially, the main story of the movie is it's about these 5 men who are in this building, and the elevator takes them down to the bottom floor to, like, the sub-basement, and they end up in this room, and they end up getting stuck there. So to pass the time, each of these men tells the stories of these reoccurring dreams that they've been having. Now, I'm gonna give away a bit of a spoiler here, but if you've seen the first one, you could kind of already figure out what's actually going on with these men, but it turns out that these 5 men are already dead, and these stories that they're telling are actually the stories of how they died. And very much like the first one, the stories in this movie are basically morality tales. They're stories about bad things happening to bad people. Now, the first story in the movie is about this man who is looking for his sister with the intent on killing her, because it turns out that his sister has inherited all their father's money, so now he wants to kill her, so he tracks her down to this small town, but it turns out the town is inhabited by vampires, and that's all I want to say about this story, but this is actually a really, really good segment of the movie. My only complaint about it, though, is when you see the vampires and you see their fangs look really freaking goofy looking, but besides that, it is a very, very good segment of the movie. Now, the second story in the movie kind of stands apart from the other stories because this one doesn't seem to fit with the theme of bad things happening to bad people, because what happens to the main character of this story, I honestly don't think he deserved it. Like, he is kind of an asshole in the story, but he didn't really deserve what happens to him at the end of this story. But essentially, it's about this guy who marries this woman, and this guy has, like, OCD, like, really, really bad, and this woman that he marries, she rearranges furniture, and this freaks him the fuck out, and throughout the whole story, he's constantly nagging her, and this is starting to drive her insane, and that's the plot line of this second segment of the movie. But this second segment of the movie is actually more of a comedy, actually. Even though it does have a pretty horrific ending, it's actually very humorous, and I actually really enjoyed it. But once again, what happens to the main character of this story, yes, he was kind of a douche, but he didn't really deserve what happened to him, so I don't think this one really fits with the whole theme of bad things happening to bad people. The third story in the movie is about this magician. Him and his wife are in India, and this magician comes across this woman who can do this magic trick with a rope, and he, of course, thinks it's just a trick, but it turns out it's actually real magic, and he tries to steal this magic rope from this woman, and I don't want to give away what he does to this woman to get this rope, or what his punishment is for what he does, but this is actually a really, really good segment of the movie, and the ending, I'm not gonna lie, the ending is actually pretty freaking creepy. The fourth story in the movie is about this horror writer who has himself buried alive as part of an insurance scam, but it turns out he's also planning on killing the person who's helping him out with this scam, but it turns out this person who's helping him out is actually double-crossing him and is just planning on leaving him and letting him suffocate to death. But at the same time, there's also this little subplot in the story about these two medical students who are trying to dig up a corpse to help them pass an exam. And that's all I want to say about this story, but this one is actually kind of a horror comedy, and it is actually a really fun story. Now, the fifth and final story in the movie is about this artist who, in the beginning of the story, is living down in Haiti, and it turns out that in the past he was screwed over by these people, so he goes to this voodoo priest asking him to help him use black magic to get revenge on these people who screwed him over, and that's all I want to say about this particular story in the movie, but this is also a really good one as well. So, overall, The Vault of Horror is definitely a very entertaining anthology film, and if you like horror anthology films, I would definitely recommend this. And if you've seen the first movie, Tales from the Crypt, I would definitely recommend this one. So yeah, that's my review on The Vault of Horror, and bye.